So welcome back to CSC 220. This is Intro to Cybersecurity. Today is Wednesday. I would like to call out that we spent some quality time in the last two classes reviewing the outcomes of your Module 1 solution. And that was with the full understanding that after we reviewed your specific solutions, you would have the opportunity to supplement and resubmit your solution for additional credit. To date, there are very few students who have resubmitted their solution. And one thing I would tell you is that after you reconcile a module assessment, when you're ready to take your final attempt of the module one assessment, and that would be 1.7, the retake of the module 1 assessment, the difficulty level is going to be a bit higher than the first assessment. And it will include elements that we spent 2 days in class together to walk through, to review, so that we could take things to the next level, okay? Put another way, I'd like to think that some of the time we spend in class can be more hands-on and more of a workshop thing, workshop nature, except that on the business end of things, if you don't capture the additional insights, the additional knowledge and understanding that was gained, and you don't do something to capture more credit, it's not that it's a wasted effort, but it's hard to justify, right? So you will be teaching me as a class whether or not the 2 days we spent reviewing your results are a thing that takes us to the next level, or if it's just a waste of time and we discontinue that practice. I personally like having a chance to share results and to discuss and review. And I think there's a great deal to be gained from sharing results with each other, especially if they're not the typical garden variety results. I need each of you, before you take your final attempt of the Module 1 assessment, which I have not yet posted, I need each of you to take the time and the details that we shared. We'll post those videos. Now, when I post the videos in your Module 1, under the resources and session recordings, when I post these details in here, as I have, this isn't for public viewing. It's not in the public YouTube channel, okay? So if you were in class and you shared your screen, everybody in class saw what you shared. But unless you're in the class and you have access to this link specifically, you're not going to be able to see the recording. So we have taken action to post these 2 sessions and the recording for the 2 sessions in that manner so that you can use that as a handy reference, all right? So if you want to go back to the Module 1 solution and then take that home and apply those additional measures and recommendations, you have a chance to apply those additional measures and recommendations. Then you capture new artifacts. Then you resubmit your solution, even though the first one is already in there. Then you have taken your knowledge and your application of that knowledge, more specifically, the application of that knowledge, to a whole nother level. And then when you take your final attempt of the Module 1 assessment, having reconciled your mistakes and refined your hands-on, right, you're in a better place. and you'll finish strong. I am a little disappointed that I did not see more people resubmitting what we spent quality time to review. So I'm not trying to be too edgy here, but I need you at this time, after our class is over, I need you to go back into the resources folder if you need to, pull up the video, whether it was Monday or Friday, where you shared your details. We made specific recommendations in class. Follow through, do it, capture the artifacts, and post those in the Module 1 solution. Now, does anyone have any observations, comments, questions on what I've just shared? Okay, hearing none, I will post the 1.7 final attempt, the retake of your Module 1 assessment before Friday, and you'll have through the end of the week to complete your final attempt of the Module 1 assessment, okay? Please be sure you reconcile before you make that attempt. Sometimes people get rushed. They're like, yeah, I didn't miss many items. And then they don't go back and resubmit stuff for their solutions or their assignments. And it doesn't end well, right? Instead of getting a higher score, they get a lower score. It's kind of a bummer. I'm just saying. All right. So what do we do today? Today, we're going to move forward into Module 2 content. Today, we will begin review of cybersecurity programs. So in the first module, we talked about cybersecurity essentials. In the second module, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity programs, how to set the stage for success, and something called risk management. Now, some of you may think that this aspect of cybersecurity is not really all that jazzy, right? It's not that sexy. And I would agree that it's really not as exciting as, watching a live hacker on your home network, or, catching something malicious on your system and then retracing where it came from. But this is really where the rubber meets the road. In any organization, if people take the time to do some essential planning or strategic planning, if there is a blueprint, right? If they define specific goals and objectives for their cybersecurity program, if they have education, awareness, and training, if they have tactical plans. So these are long-term plans, and these are, okay, what do we do to help our security get better in the next week, in the next month? Short-term plans would be called tactical planning. Do we have policies and defined procedures, right? Do we have, in those defined procedures, do we have some checklists or guidelines that we can use to check the practice of those procedures? And a lot of times people have a defined procedure and then half the users aren't practicing it. We'll talk about access control and ACLs, the capability tables, group policy objects in a domain environment, all those things. But also, we will touch on some security controls, what defense in depth looks like, and how redundancy and fault tolerance can help dramatically improve our ability to recover, especially for no-win situations, zero-day attacks, catastrophic, ransomware. Everything's encrypted. What do we do? So, do you have fault tolerance? Do you have redundancy? Are you capturing decent backups? A lot of people don't know the basics of backups, what makes for a good backup, a data backup. Any questions about chapter 3 so far?
Nope, not from me.
Yep. When we talk about risk management, we're talking about taking this first phase to another level. When you have plans and you have policies, procedures, and practices, all of this is part of a larger framework to reduce the risk that there would be losses or costs, right? And the loss that you avoid, is the whole point of working risk management. So the formal name for that activity is called risk management. When you're taking a program and plans and then turning them up so that you're operationalizing them, you're operating under those plans, a lot of the duties and responsibilities that you perform can be defined as risk management activities, where you're protecting assets and reducing the exposure to reduce the risk. The US federal government has published some very specific guidelines, right? Risk management framework. So this risk management framework is actually a classic. It's something that we'll refer to consistently for the rest of the course. And the National Institute of Science, Standards and Technology, the National Institute of Standards and Technology has a computer security resource center, and they publish special publications. So they put out special publications. That's what the SP means. And anything that has to do with cybersecurity begins with the number 800. And here you see 800-53 has to do with controls. So the NIST risk management framework basically starts in a very practical manner with a review of security controls, the kinds of things, the measures that you adopt to secure, to reduce the risk and exposure, to recover when bad things happen, right? That's all a part of this. So this framework is basically a hierarchy or a layered list of main things to do, and then within each category, the finer points of those things to do. You're going to want to download the latest version of this document like I just did. When you do that, you're going to want to go to the download URL or go to here, right? Use the DOI reference. You'll notice that this is the publication for risk management framework. So 800-37 is the specific reference by NIST that talks about the framework specifically, and the controls that are used to implement that framework is 800-53. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this, and that's going to be important for us to have as a reference. I hope you're doing the same thing as we're doing it now. Once again, I hope you're doing the same thing, I went to Google and typed in a very basic phrase, cybersecurity risk management framework. And then it's the first link right here. And then here you see the reference to 800-53. 53. 800-53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. 53. So the controls is about how to implement that risk management framework. 800-37 is about the framework. This is the federal standard. Now, why should you care about the US federal standard? Let's pause for a second. Do any of you have plans to work with or work for an agency or department of the US Virgin Islands government? Anyone?
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a fair answer. Okay. So, and it's okay to say, well, this is in its 5th revision. These controls have been around a long time. What you're going to want to do is click to download the revision 5 of 800-53, and then go ahead and download that as well, right? You'll notice a very important distinction here. So along with the controls, does everybody see this word right here? What is that word? Anyone?
Baselines.
Baselines. Yes, thank you. So you have controls, and what you want to do as you're applying those controls is take an account of your systems and your network baselines, right? You're going to want to understand, so baselines are like the metric against which you measure your cybersecurity efforts. And in a similar manner, when you are capturing details about your system after you've performed optimizing your personal technology, you have a baseline of, so in a similar manner, when you have completed the optimizing your personal technology assignment, you're establishing a baseline of what you know to be healthy, routine operating conditions, right? If I don't, right now, I have a lot of applications open in order to conduct a class. But if I had like no applications running, no browser tabs open, I had no email sitting in an inbox on a separate window, if I closed all my stuff out and I logged into Windows and I wasn't doing anything yet, I'd see a certain baseline for CPU activity, memory consumption or allocation, disk activity, reads and writes, bandwidth activity for my network, whether it's Wi-Fi, that's send and receive, the S and R is send and receive, yeah. You can see that there's a variety of different metrics. If we capture a snapshot of this screen, and if we want to, we can go to this screen, capture a snapshot, go to this screen, well, this screen, this screen, this screen, this screen, this screen, capture snapshots. We have a baseline of what we know to be proper, routine, healthy functions. And when we say baseline for NIST, we're talking about the baseline criteria for our program, our controls, and it's a useful comparison. So the reason we look at baselines is to be able to compare how our criteria, our controls are relative to the standards, right? So this is on a program level, and the one that I just shared out of Task Manager is really more in the trenches with the device or system. Does anyone have any comments or questions or observations based on the information we've just shared? All right, hearing none. In this module, you'll have one assignment, and then you'll get into the solution. And you'll notice the solution is speaking to the very thing we just reviewed. Establish the context to ID active threats. In a word, baseline, right? These are the student learning objectives from chapters 3 and 4. So, there's more official content that we're going to try to review here. One of the things that I wanted to call out to you in particular in this reference folder, in addition to the slides for chapters 3 and 4, in addition to the study guide and the study guide addendum, oh my goodness, you also have Module 2 study guide addendum supplemental. If it's in here, if it's in the references folder, it's important to take the time to read and to know. Actually, anything inside the references folder you should memorize. So the first order of business for you as you take up our new module is to dig in as soon as possible. Review the slides, take a look at some of the notes and diagrams, right? This particular document helps provide context for the leadership in an organization. Why is that relevant? Well, if you have a program, you have to have leaders to guide the program. And this basically talks about what's traditional for many organizations. You've heard of the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO, the president of an organization. But then you also have the Chief Financial Officer, you have the Chief Information Officer, you may also have a Chief Operations Officer. This has to do with the routine operation and production of the organization, right? Sometimes you have a military context. It's important to relate the military context against civilian organizations or corporations. So in military parlance, the S1 of a military organization, a unit of the armed forces, they have to do with the human element, right? So that's knowledge, skills, and ability of the people. That's what they're concerned about, the education, awareness, and training of the people, right? S2 in the military is typically referred to as the intelligence or brains of the operational capacity. So you have people who are in part of military intelligence. They're the ones that are out there conducting assessments and taking satellite photos, analyzing documents to determine things that aren't that obvious. The S3 is the operational equivalent. So whenever you're dealing with the business production side of an organization, a good example of this would be a nursing desk. Nurses on the floor of a hospital would be the people who are logging hours caring for patients, and those logged hours are the billable units that allow the hospital to collect funds from the insurance, from Medicare, from Medicaid, from health insurance companies, and all that. So when you look at an organization, it's important to consider which departments or which components of that organization have to do with the production part of that organization. Another way to think of this is which part provides the goods and services that are actually delivered to the organization's customers. Now, if you think about the production side of things, this part of the organization needs resources. They need material, they need money, they need equipment. And when you talk about the logistics, or the supply part of things, the supply chain is huge, especially for cyber. If you order inexpensive network switches or firewalls or routers, and you have someone in logistics who is going to just buy the cheapest thing. Oh, hey, we have a great source for our supply when it comes to a certain item. Well, you know what? I think I need to make my point a slightly different way. But before I make the point about logistics and how huge it is in cybersecurity, maybe what I ought to do is ask, does anyone have any observations or comments at this point? Observations, comments, questions?
So, okay, so I know when you said like S1, S2, that's mainly for the military. So is that like a shortening of just Surface 1, Surface 2? Because that's what I feel like it is, but I'm not sure.
Okay, let's see. Nope, sorry. Where's that document? Oh, is it online? Oh, there it is. Okay, your question had to do with the S?
Yeah, just like the meaning of it, if there is a
The
meaning.
meaning of S, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a great question. When you're talking about a military organization, you have a commander, right? And every military unit has a commander. And sometimes they're colonels in the military, depending on the size of the organization, right? So if it's a platoon or it's a section, then you can have a lieutenant, you can have a captain for a company-sized element, you can have colonels for a battalion-sized, and so in every organization you have what's called the line commander, and that in the military organization, the line commander is the commander at the top, and that commander has departments that help manage the staff, the personnel. So they're the different components of the organization that work in support of the commander. The commander has to be able to replace casualties. I mean, nobody likes to think about this, but the personnel, the S1, the staff one, the number one staff for a colonel is that military professional, officer and non-commissioned officers. So the S1 of a military organization is the first position of staff that supports the line officer. So you could have a captain that is the S1 of a battalion, and that captain could be now a captain rank can also be a commander of a company, right? So when you get to a certain level of size in an organization, battalion level organizations, there are designated staff members to work in support of the commander. S2 is the second staff position, and their specialty area is intelligence. S3 is operations, and S4 is logistics. When you deal with brigade or larger units like regiment, brigade, corps, those are huge organizations. So essentially 3 to 4 companies makes a battalion, 3 to 4 battalions make a brigade, 3 to 4 brigades make a division. There's kind of a pecking order there. And what we're dealing with is the size of an organization that has about 1,000 people, okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
So
is.
so S stands for staff. When you're dealing with an organization like, I don't know, the Department of Education in the US Virgin Islands, I'd be willing to bet that the Department of Education has a similar number of employees, maybe 1,000 teachers altogether, right? And so the secretary of the Department of Education would be like the commander. And then the person who handles HR for the Department of Education would be the equivalent of the S1. And then, of course, you know, so on. Now, what is the equivalent for the Department of Education for intelligence or brains? It could be research and development. It could be institutional assessment. You know, how well are we teaching our kids? How you know, how is the efficiency of our organization? Operations are the schools and the teachers. Logistics would be maintenance, the facilities staff, the security, the lunchroom, cafeteria people, right? Logistics. So there's a parallel there. And the thing that I wanted you to understand is that most organizations have kind of like this organization, this hierarchy. And it's really important to understand how that hierarchy works and the roles that are played, because hackers are going to get inside that organization and they're going to find weak points. So maybe the HR computers are better protected because they're sensitive information, payroll information, health insurance information, benefits information, right? Maybe that's sensitive stuff. But then when it comes to the cafeteria staff that orders the food to resupply the cafeteria, so what? So all the school children get to eat breakfast and lunch, right, at the school. That may not seem to be a very important aspect of the organization from a cybersecurity point of view. But what we're learning is that every facet of the organization is important. You cannot afford to overlook any part of the organization when you come up with a program for how to protect everybody from hackers. Somebody that gets into the cafeteria is going to be able to break into, the classrooms where they can change grades, or the HR department where they can plant false information and somebody gets fired, you know? Oh, you lied about your job application, you know, this is serious. We're going to terminate you. Oh, no, that has to be a mistake. I can explain. And like, well, all right, save it for the committee. You're not teaching anymore, right? That kind of stuff. So in any case, this is just useful information in terms of understanding how the leadership of an organization is structured. And in order for you to have a program that's effective, you have to know something about it. So again, this may not seem like really sexy stuff when it comes to cybersecurity, but if you see the phrase chief of staff, has anyone ever seen that before? In an organization, you have chief of staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a seriously elevated position. Usually the chief of staff is someone who is a senior VP, a vice president, or an executive vice president, and they are typically like the number 2, right? They are the right-hand man or right-hand woman of the chief executive officer. And they would have sway over all the other areas, right? They would help organize all of the staff level resources for the commander. If we're talking about the military, the equivalent of a chief of staff is someone who's called an XO, or executive officer. You may have heard of the term XO. You know, who's the CO? Well, that's the commanding officer. Well, who's your XO? That would be the chief of staff. What do? Well, they help manage all of the different divisions and departments that support the organization or the military unit, right? You got to understand something that's really, really important. And this is the part I think is maybe the sexiest part about personnel. And again, this is a bit of a stretch. It's kind of hard to get people jazzed about this, right? But did you know there are people who have the position, and that means they're high up the food chain on paper. So they have what's called authority. People who have the means to make things happen by virtue of their official position are said to have authority. So the chief executive officer has authority. But let's talk about the payroll clerk. Do you think that the CEO in their right mind would do anything to frustrate the payroll clerk who prepares payday checks for all the employees? Would that be a wise thing to do?
No, because the payroll person has power over practically everyone at that point.
In a sense, they do. Because if the payroll clerk says, hey, I need a new printer, and the chief financial officer says, because the chief financial officer is a part of the logistics, hey, we can't afford a new printer right now. Just use the toner that you got. What you're going to say, that payroll clerk is going to say is, hey, the checks aren't printing right. Do you know what happens when people try to deposit a check and it's not printed right? I mean, do you really understand what's going on there? And you know what that vice president's going to say? They're going to say, well, I am in charge of what you can order and what you can't order. And the payroll clerk's going to go, do you want to get paid? Does the chief of staff want to get paid? Does the CEO want to get paid? Tell you what, why don't we have a conversation with the president and let him know that nobody's getting paid Friday? Okay? People with power are important to assess for the potential to become what we call disgruntled employees, malicious insiders. There are many people in an organization that are critically important. They are absolutely essential to the way the whole thing operates. And they may not have official position, they may not have official authority, but man, do they have power. Here's a quick example of a military case of someone who has extreme power for their position, but they're just a lowly sergeant, right? Did you know that there's a special position for non-commissioned officers, for sergeants? It's called the arms room custodian or the weapons room custodian, right? It's where all the weapons are stored, right? So in a military unit, the person who controls the weapons has a lot of power, even though they may not have a lot of authority. Did you know that when someone loses a weapon in a military unit, guess what happens? When a weapon goes unaccounted for and it's missing, guess what happens to that military unit?
I would assume they would get put on pause until the weapon is found.
That's a very polite way of saying it. It comes to a screeching halt. You're absolutely right. There's an all stop. Everybody, no one can do anything until they find that weapon. If you have a machine gun, I mean, think about it. If a machine gun, like a serious machine gun, goes missing, what do you think everybody in that unit's going to do? They're going to stop doing what they're doing until they can find the machine gun. And who's in charge of all the weapons? The person in charge of the arms room, right? The weapons store. That's the sergeant. Now, the sergeant isn't the lieutenant, isn't the captain, isn't the colonel, but that sergeant has a lot of power. And that distinction is really important to understand about an organization. When you're training for cybersecurity, you better include the people that have power and not just the people who are on paper the leadership, right? We have a tendency to cater to the people who are officially the ones in charge. And that's one of the biggest mistakes any cybersecurity professional can make is to fail to understand, okay, who really makes things happen in this organization. It's not always the person with the title. That isn't very sexy, but it can save your credibility as a cybersecurity professional if you get inside the quiet corners of an organization and you discover, oh my gosh, they've hacked the payroll clerk, right? All the weapons are gone because the maintenance guy showed up to work on them and he took them, but they didn't need to be maintained. Oh, and it was a fake truck. And now the weapons are gone, right? See, those are the parts of an organization that have nothing to do with the technical side of hacking, but it's what gives the hackers such devastating capabilities. It's the knowledge of how the thing works. You want to be effective helping an organization to protect themselves, you got to think like a hacker, work like a hacker, and get in that organization inside their little quiet corners like a hacker.
So,
Okay.
Professor, sorry to interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
would it be safe to say that like the higher the number of staff you go, the more power they have? Is that safe to say?
That is generally a safe thing to say.
Okay.
Yeah, it is safe to assume that the greater the number of people they supervise, the more authority they have within the organization. Now, let's say that they have policies that say that the middle managers are the ones that really tell the departments inside a group what to do, right? See, sometimes power is delegated down to other mid-level managers. So generally speaking, you're right, but you got to understand that there's usually a pecking order. And it could be that the absolute authority doesn't have power to hire and fire on a lower level unless there's other stuff in the mix, unless there's like a HR matter with personnel, and then the personnel policy gets involved. It's like, okay, you were surfing porn on the website. You were doing not safe for work, NSFW things with your computer. And now people are threatening a sexual harassment suit. And now that they're doing that, we're going to have to take action. A person who's in charge of that whole division may not be able to save someone who's in a bad place with a middle level manager that sits below that division. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it depends on how an organization operates, but in general, what you're saying is true. And I thank you for asking that question. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for today. Good luck with your final attempt of the Module 1 assessment. Please be sure to submit the additional material that you add to the end of your solution. Just to submit a second copy of your solution, add the stuff from our walkthrough, and we'll see you on Friday. Thanks for joining us.